Canada is a nation which often gets compared to its neighbor, the United States. Our landscape, our culture, our cities, our people, and especially our leaders. These comparisons are often about current prime ministers, premiers, and mayors, but we never really get into historical comparisons. Today, I will be looking at a former premier who I think is the closest thing we have to a Canadian Donald Trump. Maurice Duplessis and Donald Trump have many differences on the outside. Maurice Duplessis was a premier of a Canadian province that spoke French, served over 50 years ago, and had a political career before taking office. Donald Trump was the head of state of a country that speaks English only 3 years ago and didn't have a political career before taking office. However, they were arguably similar in how they ran the government. Maurice Duplessis was born on April 20th, 1890. He went into politics in 1927, winning a seat in the Quebec legislature. He became the leader of the Quebec Conservative Party in 1933 and helped instigate a merger between them and the Action Libérale Nationale in 1935, 2 weeks before that year's election. The new party emerged and was named the Union Nationale. While they lost that election, there was another election less than a year later after the then premier resigned over corruption allegations. In that election, Maurice Duplessis and his Union Nationale were elected in a landslide victory, ending 39 years of Liberal rule. But only 3 years later, Duplessis lost the election to the Liberal and lost in a similar landslide to the one he had came to power in. This was during the Great Depression, and Duplessis, right or wrong, faced blame from the public for these sentiments. But Duplessis stayed on as the leader of the UN, and in 1944, he won the premiership again by a slim majority after the Liberals lost votes to a new anti-conscription party. He went on to win 3 more back-to-back elections before he died in office in 1959. He presided over a time which later became known as the Grande Noirceur, or Great Darkness, which was a term used by critics to criticize the social, political, and cultural conditions during his leadership. Duplessis advocated for very conservative values and policies. Duplessis was a devout Catholic whose policies were very much influenced by his religion. Duplessis advocated for traditional values and famously put the crucifix in the National Assembly chamber during his first term, which was displayed in the National Assembly from his first term until 2019, when François Legault removed it as part of his secularism agenda. Now, I wouldn't consider Trump very religious, given that he has lived a very secular life, especially when it comes to his relationships. But he did advocate for pro-life policies in office, appoint religious justices, and was very conservative on modern-day social issues like guns and abortion. Duplessis was also very right-wing in how he ran his economy. He advanced policies at satisfying business interests. They, like Trump's policies, delivered tax cuts for companies and individuals. Duplessis also extended tax cuts to companies who invested in new equipment and machinery. Duplessis was also characterized by accusations of being authoritarian at times. He made many big decisions within his inner circle without much consultation and centralized much of his power. He also passed some controversial and arguably authoritarian laws through the Assembly. One notable one is the Padlock Law of 1937, which allowed the government to padlock premises which were engaged in subversive activities. This law was set up to target communism and communist organizations, but critics said that this gave the government too much power to stifle political dissent among the public. Finally, Duplessis was well known for his populist way of campaigning and running Quebec. He characterized himself as an anti-establishment and a vocal proponent of the idea of Quebec identity. He supported defending the French language and Quebec identity, which was reflected in legislation promoting Quebec autonomy. This also went with his ideas of religion and society, given that for most of Canadian history, Quebec was a very Catholic province. and that was a part of their identity. As I mentioned before, Duplessis died in office in 1959. A lot of his ideas became unpopular less than a decade after his death, which is when the Quiet Revolution began, during which many Quebecers started to support more secularist policies and more progressive social policy. To learn more about the Quiet Revolution and its effects, I recommend watching my video about the October Crisis, which will be linked in the comments.